Okay, hello, good morning again. My name is Astrid, and I think he told you I am an American. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. My parents, however, are from a country in Central America called Nicaragua. Can you say that? Nicaragua. One more time. Nicaragua. Very well said. A lot of people have trouble saying that word. It kind of makes me a little sad. So thank you for saying it correctly. All right, so I guess, before I start my presentation, I am 29 years old. In Korean age, that means I am 31 years old. I went to university, I believe as he told you, in France at the American University of Paris, and I studied international relations while I was there. I can tell you right now, it was not easy. Coming from a single parent family, my mom is the only parent I have. After she arrived to America, she worked very, very hard so that I could have a good life, and thanks to her, I was able to live out my dream, which was to live in France. So I'm very grateful to my mother, so I want to do this presentation for her. Okay, I want to show everybody my mother's country. Okay, so first things first, this is the Nicaraguan flag, okay? It has blue stripes. The blue stripes represent the two oceans because since Nicaragua is in Central America, we have the Atlantic Ocean on one side and the Pacific Ocean on the other side. The white represents peace, as it does for so many occasions. White is peace. And then down here, you can see this triangle is called the coat of arms, and it has a meaning. The triangle means equality. So each side is equal and it represents equality. The rainbow stands for liberty, and the volcanoes you can see inside the triangle, that represents the union and brotherhood of all 5 Central American countries. That includes Guatemala, Panama, Costa Rica, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. All right. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit of history. In 500 CE, in the Common Era, the indigenous people began to settle in Nicaragua. They came from Mexico and also from Colombia in the south. So from Mexico in the north and Colombia in the south, the indigenous people came and settled in Nicaragua. In the 1500s, the Europeans arrived. First, it was the Spanish. Christopher Columbus arrived to Nicaragua from Honduras, one of the Central American countries. He explored only the eastern coast. So that means the Atlantic coast when he first got there. 20 years later, more Spaniards came, and they named the country after the native Nicoya people. So the indigenous people in Nicaragua are called Nicoya. In 1524, the Spanish conquistadors, they established the first 2 cities. They're called León and Granada, which are Spanish language names. They are from Spain. Now the word conquistador, in Spanish, that means a person who conquests. Okay, that comes from the word conquest. So they came to the Americas to conquest, right? All right, some history. In the 17th century, it would be interesting for you guys to know that the Spaniards, the Spanish people, were not the only people to settle in Central America. The British came in the 17th century, so that means in the 1600s and 1700s, the British people came. Let's see, in 1821, Nicaragua finally becomes independent, but it is taken by Mexico, so all the rules came from Mexico at the time. In 1838, finally Nicaragua gets real independence. In 1856, this is very, very interesting here. In 1856, an American adventurer and businessman decided he would declare himself or make himself the president of Nicaragua. That's right. An American man came to Nicaragua and he said, I want to be president today, so I will be president starting today. Does that sound like a good thing? No. Imagine if somebody from America suddenly came to your country and said, you know what? I think I'm going to be president of Korea. Would you be happy with that? No. All right, so this American president that came and took over Nicaragua, he launched an Americanization program. Americanization. That is very similar to what the Japanese tried to do to the Koreans. They tried to make you all Japanese, right, and speak Japanese language and forget your culture. So this man tried to do the very same thing in Nicaragua. He also reinstated slavery. So when Nicaragua became independent, we got rid of slavery. Do you know what slavery is? Yeah, okay, it's a very bad thing. So this man, of course, he's American, right? At that time, America had slaves still. So he decided he wanted to bring that back to Nicaragua. And he declared English as the official language of Nicaragua. Now, I think it would be interesting for you to know that in the United States, there is no official language. Did you know that? There is no official language. America doesn't have an official language. However, this man decided to make English the official language of Nicaragua. In 1857, Nicaragua got freedom from this American, so it took a whole year to take him out. In the 1860s, the British gave up their control of the Caribbean coast. Caribbean coast, that means also the Atlantic coast. That's where the British had settled. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. In 1893, there was a dictatorship. You guys know what a dictatorship is? Yes? Okay. All right. In 1912, so in 1909, the U.S. troops, so U.S. soldiers came and took out this dictator, but they decided to put some army bases on Nicaraguan soil. You guys are familiar with that. You have a lot of United States military bases here. Then this other guy came and tried to take power. And then a general killed him. And the one that was killed was Sandino. So people who followed Sandino were called Sandinistas. Okay? And after the man who killed Sandino, Somoza, that's his name, Somoza, there was the Sandinista revolution, the revolution by Sandino's followers. And it was because of this Sandinista movement led by Daniel Ortega, who was elected president. And I say that in air quotes because you know how this works. There's a revolution and one person declares himself president. So it was because of this person, Daniel Ortega, in 1979, it was because of his government that my mother had to flee her country and she had to run away to America. Luckily, her uncle was a commercial airline pilot. That means he flew airplanes for airline companies. She was able to get on his flight, and then she went to the United States and she stayed there. So she was there originally with a traveler's visa, visitor's visa, tourist visa, and she just stayed there. So she was illegal in the United States and she was not able to go back to her home country until 20 years later. Okay? Actually, when I was about 5 years old, my mother sent me to live with my grandmother for 3 months. So I was able to go back to my mother's country before she was, after I was born. All right, now, in 1990, the U.S.-backed official president, that means that there was this one person the United States was giving support to, and that person was able to become president of Nicaragua. She was the first female president of Nicaragua, and the 17th female president in the world, okay? Nowadays, we have more female presidents. So at this time in 1990, this was a huge deal. In 2006, Daniel Ortega returned to power. That's right, you heard that right. A former dictator was able to make himself president again. Only this time he did it a little more fairly. There were actual real elections at this time, and he has been in power since 2006. That's right, he is still the president of Nicaragua 10 years later. So you can imagine my mother's not too happy about this, and many Nicaraguans not happy about it at all. Okay. Now here is a bit of the geography and climate of Nicaragua. I've included a map here so you can see. United States, Mexico, and here we have Central America. Nicaragua is right here. It is in the center of Central America. It's in the middle. So every time you go there, if you look up at the sky at night, you will see that the moon is right on top of your head because it's in the center of Central America. Everybody's more familiar with our neighbor, Costa Rica. I think you would find it interesting to know Costa Rica and Nicaragua kind of have arguments the same way that Japan and Korea have arguments now. Okay, so even though we're neighbors or we're very close to each other and our cultures are a little similar, we still have a lot of arguments with them. Okay, so in Nicaragua, because of our location, we have two climates. We have two seasons, rainy season and dry season. So here you have fall, winter, spring, and summer. But in Nicaragua, we only have wet season or rainy season and dry season. That's it. That's all we have. It's tropical in the south, so that means it's quite warm. It's cooler in the north. For the geography, as you can see here, I've included a nice picture of a very big volcano. There are many beautiful lakes. It's a little more difficult to tell on this map, but you'll see later. And there are 40 volcanoes. This small country has 40 volcanoes. 19 of those volcanoes are still active today. That means there are 19 volcanoes in this small country that could just explode at any minute. Right, here we have Nicaragua. Here is the main lake, Lago de Nicaragua. Lago is the Spanish word for lake, so Lake Nicaragua. We have a smaller lake over here. We have a little bit more spread out all across the country. Maybe they're too small for this map. The capital of Nicaragua is called Managua. Managua. If you notice with Spanish language, the letters are pronounced the same way that you see them. Managua. Now, León is right here. León, and where is beautiful little Granada? I can't see it. Ah, here it is. Granada and León. Do you remember what I told you earlier about these two cities? They are the first two cities established by the Spanish conquistadores. Okay, León and Granada. Right? Now, this is the list of the ethnic groups in Nicaragua. Ethnic groups, that means our ethnicity or our, well, not really race. It's just more like what's the mixture in our blood. All right, so the first one, the majority of the population, 69%. Mix of Amerindians and Europeans. Mestizo is what they're called. Mestizo, which means like mix. Amerindian, that means American Indians. So like the Nicoya people, the indigenous Nicoya people of Nicaragua, mixed together with Europeans. So people like me. Mestizo people look a lot like me with brown skin, dark hair, dark eyes, usually kind of short. The next largest population, 17%, are of European origin. Now these people have Spanish blood, that's the majority. After that, there's also German, Italian, English, Turkish from Turkey, Danish, Denmark, and French. So even though in Nicaragua you have a lot of people with my skin tone, you also see some people that have white skin with blonde or yellow hair and green or blue eyes, and that's because of our European origins. Myself, on my mother's side, my mother's father, one of his great-grandfathers is Italian. So my great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather on my mother's side is Italian. So my mother's family name or last name is Pineda. However, originally her name should be Pallavicini Pineda. Pallavicini is an Italian name. However, one of my great-grandfathers was very angry with his father, so he took out the Italian name and only kept the Spanish name. All right. The next population we have is Afro-Nicaraguan. The Afro part means that they have African blood mixed into them. So Afro-Nicaraguans are black by skin color, and they have the hair like African people's hair. They make up about 9% of the population. Now, these people are mostly found on the Caribbean coast. So once again, that means the Atlantic Ocean side. So the Afro-Nicaraguans mostly are found on the Atlantic coast side. That's because, as you remember, maybe you remember I said earlier, the British conquered the Atlantic coast and they settled there for some time. So when the British came, they brought slaves with them. So the Afro-Nicaraguans are descendants of African slaves who escaped or were shipwrecked at sea. Okay? And also a lot of them stayed on after the British left. So they speak English. Let me go back to the previous map of the... that one, thank you. All right, so here is Celaya. This is a department. So it's similar to like Chungcheongbuk-do, for example. Okay. Now in Celaya, you'll see this city, Bluefields. The name is in English, and that's because the British, they settled here, and they brought the slaves and everything. So in this part of the country, in Nicaragua, people speak English the same way I speak English because of their descendancy from the British. All right. Now, after the Afro-Nicaraguans, 5% of our population is made up of Amerindian, American Native people, like Nicoya people. Now, look up there. 69% mestizo people mixed with native blood and Spanish blood. And now there's only 5% of actual real Amerindians who never mixed. So I find that's a little bit sad. When the Spanish came, they nearly took away all of our original native people. And you might be surprised to find there are some Asian people in Nicaragua, 2% of the population. Actually, let's see here, the Chinese, they're mostly Chinese. The Chinese settled in Nicaragua in the late 1800s. Late 1800s, that's a very long time ago. The Chinese came and settled in Nicaragua. So if you're around in Nicaragua, you will find some Chinese people and you will hear them speaking Spanish, because a lot of them don't speak much Chinese anymore. It's mostly Spanish. So in Nicaragua, as you can see, we have a little bit of every part of the world. All right, languages. Of course, the main language that we speak is Spanish. So the Spanish accent that we speak with in Nicaragua is different from the rest of the Latin American countries. Maybe Argentina is a little similar only in how we use our verbs. So to give you an example of how different it is, I will say something to you in Spanish. So in original Spanish, I guess you could say original Spanish, the verb when you tell someone to sit down, you say siéntate, siéntate. But in Nicaraguan people's accent of Spanish, we say sentate. Do you hear the difference? Okay. If you tell someone to stop in original Spanish accent, that is para, para. But in Nicaraguan Spanish, that means in Nicaraguan Spanish we say para. Okay, and the last example is tú. Tú means you in original Spanish. However, in Nicaragua we don't say tú, we say vos. Okay, and that vos comes from old Spanish, and vos was said to people of a higher ranking. So like royalty, you would say vos to them, and that was the very polite way to speak to them. But nowadays in Nicaragua we use vos to mean just regular you, anybody. So like I said before, we also speak English, mostly again on the Caribbean coast, the Atlantic coast. So the Caribbean coast was a protectorate of the British. That means that even though they did not live there anymore, they still protected that area for some time. And then, of course, lastly, indigenous languages. So indigenous means coming from the native people of Nicaragua. So here is a sign in Bluefields, the city that I told you about with the English name. The sign is in English, Spanish, and Miskito. Miskito is one of the languages spoken by the Amerindians, the native people. So of course you can see here, do not enter military zone. So this is an army base. In Spanish, no pasar zona militar. In Miskito, I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I have no idea how to say those words. I'm very sorry to my native people. All right, nature and environment. So like I said before, 40 total volcanoes, 19 are still active today. In 2016, Momotombo, our biggest one, Momotombo, it erupted for the first time in 110 years. So it'd been sleeping for 110 years and finally it erupted last year. So of course Nicaraguan people were a little worried. 4 other volcanoes, these volcanoes you see in the pictures, 4 other volcanoes were spewing lava. That means they were erupting a little bit of lava or ash. Like you can see here, that smoke is actually ash at the very same time. So there were 5 volcanoes last year that were showing some activity. These volcanoes, they're called Masaya, Telica, Cerro Negro, and San Cristobal. Down here, you can see one of our lakes. And behind this lake, this is Momotombo. Today, some people actually go, you know what snowboarding is, right? Well, in Nicaragua, we have something interesting called volcano boarding. So it's very similar to snowboarding, except you're doing it at the volcano over here. Would you do it? No, I definitely would not. All right, so that's Momotombo volcano down there. This is Lake Nicaragua, the very big lake that you saw earlier on the map. It's near the city of Granada. It has 365 islets. An islet is a small island. So there are 365 small islands in Granada. A lot of them are restaurants or small hotels that you can go and visit. Of course, you get there by boat. I actually went swimming in that lake with my cousin one time. All right. Over here, the architecture. So because it was colonized by Spain, you can see a lot of Spanish influence in the architecture. So Spanish influence because of the Spanish conquest. So here is Granada on this side, very nice, bright and colorful. And over here is León. Now this building is perhaps the most famous building in Nicaragua. It's called La Catedral de León, the Cathedral of León. It was one of the first churches built by the Spanish in Nicaragua. Over here in Granada, you can see a lot of the buildings are quite colorful. So when you go visit Granada, it still feels a little bit like you are in Europe. Okay. The religion is Roman Catholicism, and it was introduced to Nicaragua by the Spanish colonizers. There are also other kinds of Christianity, but they were mostly brought by the British. They were brought by the British in the 1800s. Now here is a little bit of our culture. There is European and Amerindian influence mixing together to make our instruments and things, okay? So the first one, this is our national instrument right here. Have you ever seen something like this before? No, okay? It's called a marimba. Can you say that? Marimba. Okay, now the marimba is a little bit complicated. In each hand, the person who plays the marimba has to hold these 2 sticks, so 2 sticks per hand to play this marimba. You can see here what the marimba looks like. So that's, yeah, it's a little bit difficult to play the marimba. All right, so other styles of music that are popular across Latin America. They are salsa, bachata, merengue, and cumbia. Salsa and merengue are a little bit similar, except merengue is a little bit slower. These 3 right here, salsa, bachata, merengue, they come mostly from the Caribbean. As you know, we have a Caribbean coast. The cumbia can come from the north, Mexico, and also from Venezuela, Colombia in the south. Now, for the music, because Latin America shares a common language, which is Spanish, everybody or every country in Latin America really enjoys music. We don't care what Latin American country the music comes from. It can come from Cuba, it can come from Argentina, it can come from Mexico. We don't care. We just enjoy the music. And Latin American people really love to dance. For us, dancing is life. If we're not dancing, we're not happy. If you ever go to a Latin American party, we are dancing from when the sun is up until the sun is up the next day. We are just dancing. We love it, love dancing. Now, a more popular and more modern type of music in Latin America is called reggaeton. Now, reggaeton in English is classified as Spanish or Spanish language Latin American hip hop music or urban music. The beats are a little bit more similar to the current Western hip hop style, but it has a little bit of our Latin American beat or influence in the music. So we really enjoy dancing to this music. Now, our most famous poet is called Rubén Darío. And here is a picture of him. Rubén Darío, during his time, was very critical of the United States for always getting involved in Latin American diplomatic or governmental affairs. So he was a very critical man, but he was also very wise and very well respected in Nicaragua. He is so respected and so loved in his home country that his body is buried at the Catedral de León, that famous church building that I showed you earlier in León. His body is found there. Cuisine, the food. Everybody's favorite thing, food. Okay, so our cuisine, you can see the lovely pictures here. I can explain them to you. So, it's a mix of Spanish food from Spain, and Amerindian native food. So it's the 2 cultures coming together. On the Pacific coast, so that means on the west coast, it's mostly fruits and corn, things made of fruit and corn. On the Caribbean coast, the Atlantic Ocean coast, it's mostly seafood and coconut, because on the Atlantic coast we have the Caribbean Sea, okay? And in the Caribbean, it's mostly seafood and coconut. Now, over here, this is called a nacatamal. It is wrapped in a banana leaf. So whatever is inside is cooked in that banana leaf to take some of the flavor. When you open the nacatamal, it looks like this. It's a mix of vegetables and some rice, maybe some meat. It can be chicken or steak or pork. It's very, very delicious. I know it does not look very delicious, but speaking as a person who is very picky with her food, there are very few things I eat, but I will definitely eat that. Very delicious. This is a tradition on Sunday. You are not Nicaraguan if you don't eat this on a Sunday. Over here, this is cheese. Now, this cheese is fried cheese. That's right, we fry it in a frying pan. It's a special cheese because it does not melt. Personally, I love to eat fried cheese because it's salty, together with this. Okay, this comes from a fruit called a plátano. A plátano is similar to a banana. However, it's much bigger and you have to cook it. You cannot eat a plátano raw. You must cook it. Depending on how old the plátano is, you can cook it in many different ways. My favorite way is plátano frito, fried plantain. In English, the plátano is called a plantain. So I love to eat the plátano frito or plátano maduro as we say in Nicaragua, because it's very sweet and I like to eat it together with the salty fried cheese. Very delicious. Over here, that's rice and beans. It's stir-fried rice and beans. In Nicaragua, we call this dish gallo pinto. Nicaraguans are obsessed with gallo pinto. Personally, I'm not too much of a fan, which is a disappointment to my mother, but I'm sorry. But many people, even Westerners from other countries, love gallo pinto. They're more obsessed with gallo pinto than I am, and that's my country. And over here, my favorite, tacos. I love tacos. Our tacos are different from the tacos that you normally see from Mexico. Our tacos are rolled and fried in a frying pan. You can have it with chicken on the inside mixed with some cabbage, some ketchup sauce, some mustard sauce, all mixed together. And we usually dip it in sour cream. It's very, very delicious. I've been able to actually make some tacos here for my friends and they love them. But even though it's easy to make, it takes a very long time. You can also eat them with steak on the inside. And then over here, my mother loves this stuff right here, vigoron. Vigoron. Now, vigoron has some rice and some meat, some cabbage, as you can see up here. And it also has this thing called chicharrón. Chicharrón, I don't think you have it here in this country. Chicharrón is like a piece of pork fat, like that jelly looking stuff from the pork fat, except we fry it and we make it very hard, so it's very hard and crunchy, and we eat it together like that, vigoron. Okay, now sports. Baseball is our favorite sport in Nicaragua. We love baseball. So you can find many Nicaraguan baseball players playing for the MLB in the United States. Boxing is our other big sport. 11 boxing world champions. World champions, 11 of them, come from Nicaragua. That's how good we are. I'm proud of that. I studied some boxing actually when I was younger. I don't know, maybe it's in my blood. I really love boxing. It's a lot of fun. You should try it. Okay, and that concludes our presentation. Hope you found it interesting.